Hey, what's up guys? My name is Saeed. Today I'm going to present you the juiciest transition for car lovers. But of course, you can use it not only for cars but also for everything. So without any further ado, let's get this going.
If you are new here, this is the third part of this tutorial. In the previous videos, we started to make everything from scratch, which included making a decent lighting system, modeling everything from scratch, adding textures and materials, and also the UV edit process. In the second part, we added a car, gave it a decent car paint material to make it look hyper realistic. Then we imported a song directly into Blender, added multiple cameras, and finally adjusted them according to the imported song, which was so cool. In this video, we go through the process of making this cool color transition effect, for which we are going to use the Blender powerful geometry nodes panel. The first thing that we need to do is to add a new car. You can of course use the same car, this classic Porsche model. But here is a point: if you want to get a good and cool result, you better pick a car that has separated parts. Since in this model the entire car body is one singular piece, the car that I'm going to use is this one. This is a Porsche GTR 911 model. I have deliberately picked this model because it has an issue and it highly affects your final render. So I suggest first watch the tutorial and then start making your own transition. You can go ahead and use your desired car, or if you want to use mine, the link will be in the description. Now to remove this Porsche model, in the outliner right click on the Porsche collection and choose delete hierarchy, which will delete all the objects within the collection. Then if you have downloaded the car, it comes as a blend file. So open the blend file, press A to select everything, then press Ctrl C to copy. And if you have the copy attributes add-on enabled, you should also select copy objects. Now return to the main project, press Ctrl V to paste. Don't touch anything, press the / key to isolate the selected objects. Then press M to move them into a new collection and call it Porsche. And since this car is rigged, it comes with some bone widgets, so we can select them and then press X to delete them. Now again press the / key to exit the isolation mode. Select the car rig, press numpad 7 to go into top view. And let's move the car to somewhere around here. Then press RZ 180 to rotate it like so. And if needed, press GZ to move it up or down and set it exactly on the ground plane. So this seems nice. Let's switch into rendered view to take a look at the car. And you may remember something. The car paint is the same as we used it in the previous tutorial for the Porsche model, which we combined with the basic material of the classic Porsche to make it look much better. Now to start our journey, we should decide on which part of the car we want the transition to happen. And that's why I mentioned a car with separated parts will work much better. On this car we have red and black parts. In the main project I decided to have the transition on the red parts. So if you want to do the same thing, go ahead and select all the red parts. You can hold down the shift key to select them, or you can select them and press H to hide them. And make sure to select all the red parts and hide them. Now if we press Alt H, we can unhide the hidden parts. And as you can see, they are all selected. So with them selected, press Shift D to make a duplicate of them. Then right click to drop them in the same place. Press the / key to isolate them. And here make sure there is an active object. So you can hold down the Shift key, click on one of the parts to highlight it, which means it is the active object. Then press Ctrl J to join them all into one singular object. Then press F2 and rename it to transition part. Press M, move it into a new collection and call it transition, so that we can easily find it from here. Now exit the isolation mode where we come up with a minor issue. This happens due to the intersection. To fix that, press S, hold down the Shift key and just slightly scale it up. And this will solve the problem. Now this is fine. So before going to make the effect, here is a very important tip that is absolutely worth mentioning. the topology of your car will highly affect your final result. In a better word, your final result depends on the topology of your car. And if you press tab to go into edit mode, here you can see that the topology of this car is not that good, especially in this area. And believe me, if you have a topology like this, you're going to get a pretty bad result. And that is why I picked a model with some issues to mention that there could be some problem like this. And this is the most important factor that you have to consider when making this color transition effect. And if you ask me, I gotta say the rest of the process is just easy. This is the most important part. And in the main project, when I came up with the idea of making a color transition, up until that time, I never select this car part and went into the edit mode to take a look at the topology. Just then I realized how bad it was, and I had to spend some time to retopology the car. So before doing anything, make sure to choose a car that has a good topology. I will tweak this one a little bit and then we can make the effect. So I made it a little better and now we can start working with it. Expand the timeline and switch it into geometry node editor. Make a new geometry node setup and rename it to color transition. Switch into solid view, then isolate the transition part. Since we need each face to turn into a separate pixel, we should split them. So press Shift A and search for split edges and place it on the connection. You can kinda see what it does, but to really see the effect, Shift A, search for a scale element and place it after the split edges. Make sure it is set on face and uniform, which means it will affect the faces equally. And then if we decrease the scale property, you can see the effect. It scales up or down each face individually. So for the time being, let's set it on 0.9. And later we will make it work automatically. Then, since these faces don't have any depths, Shift A, search for extrude mesh. Place it after the scale elements. And for the time being, it looks huge. So let's set the offset on 0.02. Yeah, looks decent. Here is a very important tip. Since we added this extrude mesh node, we have come up with a problem. If in the overlay drop-down menu we enable the face orientation, you can see that this mesh is not fully closed. When there is red faces, it means the normals are messed up and later it is going to cause major problems. To fix that, add a join geometry and place it after the extrude mesh. Move it up a little bit. Also move up the scale elements and then plug the scale element into the join geometry. Then under connection, search for flip faces. And if we add it here, it will fix the problem. Now we can disable the face orientation and get back to the process. Another problem that this extrude mesh could actually cause is the merging vertices. Since we have extruded these faces, there could be some vertices at the same spot and this could lead into problems. So to fix this one, Shift A and search for merge by distance. Place it here and I guess you have seen the change here. When we added this merge by distance node, if there is a few vertices, I mean more than one in the same spot, it will get rid all of them except for one of them. The next step is to add a controller. By animating which we can control the transition. So select the transition part and press Shift S, choose cursor to select it to bring the 3D cursor over here. Then Shift A, in the empty, add a cube. For the scale of it, right click, adjust empty display size. Drag your mouse to slightly scale it up. This is enough. The location of it is fine for the time being. Press F2 and rename it to controller. Press M and move it into the transition collection. And to make our lives easier, select the transition part and here pin it in this window. So that if we select any other objects, we will have this window always displaying the transition part node setup. Now from the outliner, drag and drop the controller into the geometry node setup. Here you can see that. Switch it into relative. And let's add the main ingredient of the effect, which is the gradient texture. Place it here. we want to control the transition by moving the controller. So we should plug the location output into the gradient texture. Now to adjust the gradient itself, we need to look through it. So Shift Control click on it, and the node wrangler will plug it into the viewer node. And if you cannot see the transition part anymore, the last node was the merge by distance over here. So plug it into the geometry on the viewer node, and it will set it back in place. So now if we move the controller, you can see that the effect is working, but it needs some adjustments. And the first thing that we need to do is to calculate the distance of each pixel with the controller, which will be done by introducing a vector mass node. So Shift A, search for vector mass. Place it between the controller and the gradient texture, and make sure the controller is plugged into the bottom vector input. Now to decide which vertices to be affected for the top vector, you should search for the position node. And this will make the effect visible. And by moving the controller, we can see the effect. We can see that it is working, but the rotation of it is off. And if we try to adjust it, it won't work. To enable the rotation for the controller, add a vector rotate. Place it after the vector mass. Switch it into Euler, and then on the controller, plug the rotation into the rotation of the vector rotate. Now if we rotate it, it is working. The result will be something like this. The black parts will be visible and the white parts will be hidden. So we should rotate the controller the way that the black parts will be set at the back of the car. So press N to open the side menu. In the item tab, it is the y-axis. So set it on 90. Which will set the black part at the back of the car, and it means that the transition starts from here. Then to control the amount of the gradient, there is a very handy node called the map range. Place it after the gradient texture, and if we decrease the from max value, we can sharpen it up. So let's go for 0.2. Yeah, this looks much better. Now unplug the map range from the viewer node and move it over here. Select this setup of node, move them over here. Let's move the map range down a little bit and plug it into the scale on the scale elements. And this will automatically derive the scale of the faces. Next up, we should delete the geometry of the faces that are hidden. And for that, we can use the delete geometry node. So over here, to join these connections together, hold down the Shift and the right click, drag across them to make a reroute point. Then Shift A, search for delete geometry. Place it over here. Let's move it up a little bit. And since we are working with faces, make sure it is set on face. To bring back the revealing part, plug the gradient texture into the selection input. To control the amount of it, introduce a compare node and place it on the connection. Now if we slightly increase the B value, we can bring back the revealing part. So let's go for 0.2. Then we should also bring back the original mesh, since this delete geometry is only showing the revealing part. And to get the main geometry back, we should add another delete geometry. So press Shift D to make a duplicate, place it over here. Then to join these two together, add a join geometry and plug both of the delete geometries into it. Now to get the parts that are revealed, the parts that will be at the back of the car, and they are before the transition area, I mean the same black part. We should plug the group input into the geometry socket of the second delete geometry. And finally the gradient texture into the selection input. And there you have it. And again, to control the amount of it, we can use a compare node. Place it over here. And let's slightly increase the B value. Yeah, I guess this is better now. So the effect is made and the rest of the process is dedicated to the materials. So we can exit the isolation mode and switch into rendered view. And the first thing that we can notice is the identical color and the material of the transition part with the red parts on the car. So we should select the transition part and head over to the material panel. Here we can see the car paint material and we should give it a different color. But for the time being, if we make any changes to it, it will also affect the material of the car. That's because they share the same material. So let's go back. Now to make this car paint material a unique material for the transition part, click on this number which says how many objects in this scene have this material. So select it and let's rename it to red part. And now if we make any changes to it, it won't affect the main material of the car. But we want to keep it red. So let's select a red part on the car and turn it into black. Now this is getting together, but we should define a different color for the transition area. So make a new material and rename it to color transition. But the second material is not applied to the object because we should define on which part of the object we want them to be. So to do that, after the first delete geometry node, the first delete geometry because this controls the transition area, as you can see. So after that, Shift A, search for set material. Plug it over here and you can already see the effect that it is working. Then from here, pick the color transition material. And then to adjust this material, switch the geometry nodes into shader editor. And here make sure the color transition material is selected. Let's give it a nice shining glassy look. So delete principal BSDF and we need two different nodes. Shift A, search for glass BSDF. Then add an emission node. Now to join them together, Shift A, search for mix shader. Plug the mix shader into the material output. Then plug the glass BSDF into the first shader input and the emission node into the second shader input. For the color of it, we can tweak the color on the emission. And since the main color of the car is red, let's go for a nice blue tint color. Something like that looks nice. Then boost the strength. Let's go for 5. Now to adjust the amount of glass and emission material, we can use the factor property on the mix shader. And why not adding a wireframe? So add a wireframe and plug it into the factor. Now the effect looks better, and if we enable pixel size, it will still look better, but we should increase the size. So let's go for 0.3 or 0.5, 0.7. This seems nice for the time being. Right now the entire transition area is lit up. To make a gradient-like emission, we can take advantage of the same gradient texture in the geometry nodes. So add a store-named attribute and place it after the split edges. Switch it into face, and to get the effect of the gradient texture, plug the map range into the value input. And here is the main point. We should pick a name to use it in the shader editor so that Blender will know which part of the geometry nodes should be considered. Let's go for mask. Then from here, press Ctrl C to copy the name. Let's switch back into shader editor. To bring the mask over here, Shift A, search for attribute node. And from here, press Ctrl V to paste the name. Now to combine the attribute nodes into the wireframe, Shift A, search for mix color. Place it on the connection. Make sure the wireframe is plugged into the A input. Then plug the color output of the attribute node into the B input. Switch the mix color into multiply and then set the factor all the way on 1. Now to really see what is going on, add a color ramp and place it after the attribute node. If you drag the black slider to the right, you can see what is going on. So to get a smooth transition over here, switch the interpolation into B-spline and let me increase the size of the pixels. Let's go for 1 or maybe 2. We just want to see the effect. So now if we play around with it, you can see we have a smooth transition. So something like this looks absolutely nice. I really like the effect of the glass and the emission node. And let me move it over here. If you don't want to have absolute off parts, I mean this part that doesn't have any emission, we can open the color tab of the black slider and increase the value property. and you can see what it does. So this is totally up to you. Now to improve the look of the transition, we can add a layer weight, which is a pretty powerful node. So add a layer weight over here, and then to bring it into game, duplicate the mix color, place it after the first one and switch it into add. Then on the layer weight, plug the facing into the B input. We can play around with the blend property, but let's not jump into conclusion and leave it on 0.5 for now. Add a color ramp, place it on the connection, again switch the interpolation into B-spline, and I start to drag the black slider to the right. I guess this way we get a better result. Yeah, this looks really nice. If you think it is too bright, you can decrease the strength on the emission. So if you set it on 1, you can decrease the emission strength, but I guess 5 is pretty fine. And not to mention that on the glass BSDF we can also tweak the color. So let's go for something like this. And then on the wireframe I set the pixel size on 0.3. So now switch the shader editor back into timeline and then collapse it. Let's go for the camera animation, but before that, select the controller to see if it is working properly. So press G, Y, move it up. So we have a minor issue over here. It is working the opposite way. And after checking the geometry node setup, I realized we missed something here. This vector mask, this is the culprit. We should switch it into subtract. Now if we select the controller and move it, it is working just fine. So bring back the timeline. Then select all the markers that we had made in the previous video. Press X to delete the markers. And for this shot, let's learn a very interesting trick for the camera animation. Go to Edit, Preferences. In the Get Extensions tab, search for Camera Rig, which is this one. In the Get Extensions tab, you have to be connected to the internet, and if you haven't yet installed these camera rigs, there will be an install button over here. If you click on it, it will take barely even 5 seconds to install it. Now let's close the preferences. With the controller selected, press Shift S and choose Cursor to Selected to set the 3D cursor over here. Then press Shift A, where in the camera now we have some new options over here. The one that we are looking for is this one, dolly camera rig. So add it into your scene and there you have it. This dolly camera rig is a really great asset if you want to go deep into the camera setup. So let's switch into solid view to take a look at our dolly rig. With the rig selected, press Ctrl Tab to go into pose mode. For this dolly camera rig setup, there are 4 different bones. This big one is the root bone. It controls the entire setup. So let's press G, Z and move it down, put it below the car. So here seems nice. Then there is this little one. It is basically used to rotate the camera. We can of course move the camera with it, but in most cases we use this bigger one to move the camera. And it is worth mentioning that we cannot rotate this big one. That is why I say we use this little one to rotate the camera. And finally there is this blue one, which is the camera aim. Wherever you move it, the camera will be always pointing at it. And it is a really handy feature. You can see that the camera is always pointing at this aim rig. Now to have an easier life, in the Porsche collection, hide the car rig and also hide the transition collection. Let's go into top view by pressing numpad 7, move the aim to the back of the car, somewhere around here. Then let's move it down and set it here. Then press Ctrl Tab to jump back into object mode. Open a new window here. Make sure it is set on 3D viewport and this window should be set on solid view. Then switch the left one into rendered view. Select the new camera, press Ctrl and numpad 0 to make it the active camera. And to be more focused, disable the overlays, press T to close the toolbar menu. Then go to the camera panel. In the viewport display, set the passport out on 1. Scroll up a little bit where we have the focal length. Let's decrease it to 30 so that we will have a wider range of view. And since in this shot we need a horizontal framing, go to the output panel, set the resolution X on 1920 and Y on 1080. Now select the camera rig, go into pose mode, select this controller and let's place it somewhere around here. And if you want to have more control over it, in the toolbar menu, enable the transform tool. Let's move it down, place it somewhere around here. Let's scroll forward to have a bigger view. This is nice. Then move the bone away from the car to have something like this. You can of course select the aim and adjust it more. So for the first frame, I like to frame my camera like this. Now select the controller, the aim and the root bone. Press K to make a keyframe for location and rotation. Then let's move forward in time. Frame, let's go for 185. Select the aim bone and move it towards the front part of the car. Here seems nice, we can always adjust it. Then select the root bone, move it forward a little bit. Then press R to rotate it like so. And we should adjust the aim again since we have moved the root bone. So select it and place it here. Then select the controller and adjust it like so. Let's move it up a little bit. This is getting better and better. Yeah, something like that looks nice. So for the second keyframe, I like to adjust my camera like so. Again, select the controller, the root bone and the aim. Press K to make another keyframe for location and rotation. Let's go to the first frame, play the animation to see what we have. Yeah, we have a pretty nice and smooth animation. And unlike the previous video that we set the keyframes on linear to have a constant speed all over the path, for this shot, we need to set the keyframes on Bezier. So press A to select all the bones of this setup, then in timeline, press A to select all the keyframes. Press T. In the keyframe interpolation menu, make sure to set them on Bezier. Of course, you're basically set on Bezier, but just to be sure, do that. This is our animation for the time being. And here is the point. Since in the previous video we added a song, it is still being played. You cannot hear that because my speaker is off. So if it is bothering you, open a new window here, switch it into video sequencer. And this is our song. You can select it and press X to delete, or if you don't want to delete it, you can press N. In the strip tab, set the volume on 0 so that it won't be played. Now we can close this menu. Then let's move forward in time and find a nice frame. So here seems fine. Frame 134. Again, select the controller, the root bone and the aim. Press K to make another location and rotation keyframe. And of course, if we play this new keyframe, actually doesn't make any changes. But if we select it and move it backward, for example, let's set it on frame 15. Now if we play, see what happens. We have a nice slow motion animation for the camera and it looks insane. Now jump back into object mode and unhide the transition collection. On the frame 15, where we have this keyframe, select the controller, press G, Y, move it to the back of the car until you cannot see the transition part anymore. So here seems nice. Press K to make a keyframe for location. Let's move forward. Let me see. Here seems nice. Frame 130. Move the controller forward until the transition is complete. So something like that. Press K to make another location keyframe. Let's take a look now. Nice. Of course, the viewport is so slow, and if we even switch into solid view, it doesn't actually help, since it's mainly because of this transition part. And if we disable the transition collection, it will be nice and smooth again, as you can see. But we don't actually need to hide it since our shot is almost complete. Now let's make our ground plane wet, which will go really nice with this shining glassy-like transition effect. Just wait and see what it does. So I have prepared a node setup for you which is insane. The link will be in the description. It comes as a blend file. Now to import it into our scene, go to File and choose Append. Navigate to where you have downloaded the file, which is this one. It's called Wet. Double click to open it. Then open the material collection. Here you can see the wet material. Select it and then click on Append. Now in order to be able to use it, Shift right click here to bring a 3D cursor over here. Then press Shift A in the mesh, add a plane. With the plane selected, go to the materials panel, open the existing materials menu and search for wet, which is this one. Add it into the plane and you can see what it is doing. To see the material, switch the right window into shader editor. And this is the node setup that has been put into a group. And we need to combine this group with the ground plane material. So select the group, press Ctrl C to copy. Then select the ground plane. Here is the basic material of the plane that we added in the first video. So press Ctrl V to paste the group over here. Now we can select the plane and delete. So as I said, we should combine this nude group with the basic material of the ground plane. And that's really easy. So let me make some room over here. First, plug the shader output of the wet group into the material output. Then to get our ground plane material back, plug the principal BSDF into the user shader. And for the ground color input, we need the base color map, which in our case, if you can remember from part 1, was this albedo map that was plugged into this hue saturation node. So subsequently plug the hue saturation into the ground plane input. Now we are talking. And not to mention that it has so many different parameters that can be adjusted. So since we don't have any rain, let's set the density on 0. Then we can also increase the detail a little bit to get this nice look. Now just see how cool it looks. These reflections are insane. The final step is to make that glare effect around the transition area, and that will happen in the compositing panel. So let's go into camera view, and this frame already looks pretty fine. And let's pick a frame to have a still render. So this seems nice. Now go to the render panel, and for the render, enable the denoise, which is already enabled. And the sampling, here is a point. This scene is pretty light. If you even set the max sample of the render on 1000, it won't take that long to render. As I said, this scene is really light. So let's switch into 3D viewport, select the camera, go to the camera panel and enable depth of field. Select the controller, Shift S, cursor to selected. Press Shift A in the empty at the plane axis. Right click, adjust empty display size. Scale it up a little bit just to have a better look at it. Again, select the camera and for the focus object, choose the new empty. Now if we decrease the f-stop, we can increase the blurriness and set our car into focus. So let's go for 1.5. You don't actually want to make the background too much blurry. So something like that looks nice. And I highly suggest select the plane axis, move it closer to the transition area so that it will be more in focus. Switch into solid view, and to have a still frame render, go to render and choose render image. But there is of course a shortcut. You can press F12 and wait a little bit until the render is done. So the render is done. Now we can close the render tab and go to the compositing panel. Enable use nodes, where we have the render layers and the composite node. So let's make some room here. Then hold down the Shift key and right click, drag across this connection line to make a reroute point. Then Shift Ctrl click on it to bring up the viewer node. You can press V to zoom back and Alt V to zoom in. So here seems nice. Now let's add the glare. So press Shift A, search for glare. Place it on the connection and you can already see what it does. So for the first glare, let's switch into fog glow. Set the quality on high. And the setting is almost fine. Yeah, but you can go ahead and tweak it the way that you like. So I guess this is fine for now. Let's add another glare, and this time let's leave it on streaks. Again, set the quality on high, open the highlights tab. Let's increase the threshold to 2. If you increase the threshold, you actually decrease the areas that are affected by this color. So if you increase it a lot, you will actually kill the effect. So 2 is fine, and the rest of the setting is just fine. And this was the exact same setting that I used in the main project. So I hope this series of tutorials have been useful, and see you next time.